You ever have one of those moments where your heart makes the call before your brain even catches up, one of those moments that can tear your whole life in two? That's the kind of day it was for Deshaun Briggs, a man who could rebuild an engine blindfolded but couldn't turn away when someone needed help. What he didn't know was that this split-second choice, made on a sweltering afternoon in July, would put everything he had on the line, and would connect him to a stranger who could rewrite his future. The town of Millstone was small enough that folks noticed when you got a haircut. Summer here wasn't just hot, it was thick. The kind of heat that made asphalt shimmer and pressed sweat into the creases of your clothes. Inside Mallory's garage, the air was even heavier, a stew of burnt oil, rust, and yesterday's coffee. The big rolling door was open to the street, but the breeze had given up hours ago. Deshaun was hunched over the hood of an old Jeep, sleeves rolled up, forearms smeared with black grease. He had been at it since before sunrise, one water pump, 2 brake jobs, and now a stubborn radiator leak that refused to quit. His t-shirt clung to his back, and the muscles in his shoulders ached, but work was work. The shop's owner, Kent Mallory, was a man whose smile never reached his eyes. In his 50s, with sunburned skin and a belly from too many fast food lunches, Kent measured worth in dollar signs. Emergencies, kindness, or doing the right thing, didn't mean much to him if they didn't end in an invoice. Deshaun had learned to keep his head down, keep the jobs moving, and keep his opinions to himself. It was just past 3 when a strange sound cut through the usual symphony of tools and clanging metal, tires locking up hard on pavement. Deshaun's head snapped up. Out on Millstone's main drag, an ambulance skidded to an awkward stop just 10 feet from the garage, hazard lights strobing in the bright sun. No siren. Just silence, and urgency. Before Deshaun could even set his wrench down, the driver's door burst open. A paramedic, a young woman with cropped dark hair and sweat streaking down her temple, jumped out. Her voice cracked with desperation. "It died. We've got a patient in critical condition, we need to move now." Deshaun didn't need details. "Pop the hood." She didn't hesitate. The latch clicked, and in seconds Deshaun was leaning into the engine bay. The problem screamed at him, a shredded serpentine belt hanging limp like a cut rope. Without it, nothing was moving. "I've got one inside," he said, already backing away. 3 minutes. Her eyes flashed fear. "We don't have 3 minutes." "You do now," he replied, breaking into a run toward the parts rack. Inside, Kent spotted him. "What's going on?" he asked, voice tight. "Ambulance broke down, patient inside," Deshaun said, snatching the belt from the shelf. Kent's brow furrowed. "That's not free." "Who's paying for it?" "Because the city sure won't." Deshaun didn't stop. "Bill me." Back outside, the summer heat hit him like a wall, but his hands moved with lightning precision. He'd done this job 100 times, but never with a human life riding on every second. The belt looped over the pulleys, the tensioner locked into place, and Deshaun stepped back. "Fire it up." The paramedic turned the key. The engine roared back to life. "Go," he shouted. She slammed the door, the rig lurched forward, and in seconds it was gone, red lights flashing into the distance. Deshaun stood in the sunlight for a beat, catching his breath. Somewhere in that metal box was a stranger's life hanging by a thread. He hoped he'd bought them the time they needed. When he walked back into the shop, Kent was waiting. Arms crossed. Jaw like stone. "You just stopped a paying job for some charity stunt." Kent's voice was flat. "You think we're a free parts store?" Deshaun set the greasy rag on the workbench. "That wasn't charity. That was life or death." Kent didn't blink. "You cost me money. And you did it without permission. That's a firing offense in my book. Clean out your station, you're done." It hit Deshaun like a punch to the ribs. He'd worked here for 8 years. 8 years of overtime, emergency call-ins, and fixing jobs everyone else turned down. And this was how it ended, over a part worth less than a tank of gas. He didn't argue. Didn't ask for another chance. Just started packing his tools. Each ratchet and socket dropped into the box with a hollow clink that sounded heavier than it should. By the time he loaded the last crate into his old Chevy, the sun was leaning toward the horizon, staining the streets orange. But to Deshaun, the colors felt muted. He wasn't just losing a paycheck, he was losing the place where he'd poured years of his life. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every image replayed, the paramedic's face, the flash of the lights, the sound of the engine roaring back to life. Somewhere out there, someone might still be breathing because of him. That thought kept him from feeling regret, but not from feeling the weight of what came next. When he pulled into the driveway of his small, weathered duplex, his neighbor, Loretta James, was rocking on her porch. In her late 60s, sharp-eyed and silver-haired, Loretta had been in Millstone her whole life. "You're home early," she called, suspicion in her tone. "Got fired," Deshaun said, hauling his toolbox out of the truck bed. She let out a low whistle. "Mallory finally did it, huh? I told you that man's heart was made of drywall." He managed a weak smile. "Guess it took me saving someone's life to push him over the edge." Loretta studied him for a long moment. "You did the right thing, didn't you?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "Didn't change the ending." Her rocking chair creaked. "Life's like that sometimes. But don't you forget, right doesn't pay quick, but it pays big when it finally shows up." He wanted to believe her. But that night, staring at the ceiling, the worry felt heavier than his toolbox. What Deshaun couldn't know, not yet, was that the patient in that ambulance wasn't just anybody. And the choice he made in that boiling summer heat had already set in motion something that would reach right back to his front door. The next morning, Deshaun woke earlier than usual. Not because he wanted to, but because his mind refused to let him sleep. The empty spot on his kitchen table where bills had been stacking for weeks seemed to stare back at him like a quiet threat. Rent was due in 10 days. His power bill had a red notice. And his truck needed new tires before it ate him alive in repair costs. He sipped stale coffee, staring out the window, thinking about the ambulance. The sound of its engine roaring back to life replayed in his mind over and over. He wondered if the patient had made it. Then he stopped himself, wondering didn't pay the bills. By late morning, he decided to walk into town. Millstone was small, and everyone knew him, but today the walk felt different, like eyes were following him. He passed Cora's diner, where he usually grabbed lunch on weekends, and the hardware store where old Mr. Davidson gave him a nod from the doorway. As he turned the corner toward Main Street, he spotted the same young paramedic from yesterday standing outside the coffee shop, holding a paper cup and talking on her phone. When she saw him, her eyes lit up. She ended her call quickly and walked over. "You're the guy from the garage," she said, a mix of relief and gratitude in her voice. "Yeah," Deshaun said, still unsure how to react. "That ambulance make it to county in time?" Her face softened. "Because of you, yeah. You saved us precious minutes." The patient, they were in rough shape. Heart failure. "If we'd been stuck waiting for another unit," she shook her head. "It could have been bad." Deshaun let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Glad I could help." "You didn't just help," she said. "You gave someone a second chance. And, this is important, you should know who you saved." Before he could ask, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. A man in a crisp gray suit stepped out, tall with salt and pepper hair, eyes sharp but not cold. Even in casual movement, he carried himself like someone used to being listened to. The paramedic gestured toward him. "That's him. That's the patient's son." The man walked straight toward Deshaun and extended his hand. "You must be Mr. Briggs." "My name's Charles Denham." Deshaun shook his hand, firm but puzzled. "I'm guessing your father was the one in the back." Charles nodded. Henry Denham. And yes, if it weren't for you, he wouldn't have made it to the operating room. They said even another 5 minutes might have been too late. Deshawn didn't know what to say. I just did what anyone would have done. Charles's lips curved into a faint smile. Not anyone. Most people would have looked the other way. I did some asking around last night, heard you lost your job because of it. Deshawn shrugged, trying to play it off. Yeah, well, guess my boss didn't see it as good business. Charles's eyes held a flicker of something, disbelief, maybe even anger. That's ridiculous. My father, he's not just my father. He's the CEO of Denham Industries. The name landed with weight. Even in a small town like Millstone, Denham Industries was a giant, manufacturing plants, warehouses, hundreds of employees. Charles continued, I came here today because I think people who do the right thing, especially when there's no reward in sight, are rare. My father agrees. When he's strong enough, he wants to meet you himself. Deshawn blinked, unsure if this was gratitude or something more. I appreciate it, but I wasn't expecting anything. I was just trying to make sure somebody's family didn't get that call. Charles studied him for a moment. What's your situation now? Deshawn chuckled bitterly. Right now? Unemployed. Trying to figure out what comes next before the bills bury me. Charles nodded slowly, as if making a decision in his head. I think we might be able to fix that. Before Deshawn could respond, Charles pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it over. This is my direct number. Call me tomorrow morning. I'll make sure it's worth your time. The SUV's driver stepped out to open the back door, and Charles climbed in without another word, leaving Deshawn standing there with the card in his hand. The paramedic smiled faintly. Told you it was worth knowing. That night, Deshawn sat at his kitchen table staring at the card. The name was embossed in silver letters, Charles Denham, Executive Vice President, Denham Industries. Underneath, a private phone number. Loretta from next door knocked lightly and peeked in. You look like a man who just found a golden ticket and isn't sure if it's real. Deshawn chuckled. Something like that. She stepped inside, eyeing the card. Whatever it is, don't you go talking yourself out of it. Life doesn't hand folks like us easy doors. When one opens, you walk through before it slams shut. Deshawn didn't say much after that. But later, lying in bed, he felt something he hadn't felt since yesterday morning, hope. He didn't know exactly what Charles Denham had in mind. But he knew one thing, tomorrow could be the day everything changed. The next morning, Deshawn woke before the alarm. The card with Charles Denham's number sat on the nightstand, almost glowing in the dim light. He got dressed in his cleanest shirt, the one he usually saved for church or rare family gatherings, and sat at the kitchen table with his phone in hand. He dialed the number. Charles Denham, the voice answered on the second ring. This is Deshawn Briggs. We met yesterday. I remember, Charles said, his tone brisk but warm. I'm glad you called. Can you be at County General by 11? My father's awake and he's been asking about you. By 10:45, Deshawn was standing outside the hospital's cardiac wing, hands shoved into his pockets, trying not to fidget. A nurse led him down a quiet hall and into a private room with a large window letting in the late morning sun. In the bed sat Henry Denham, older than Deshawn expected but with a sharpness in his eyes that told him the years hadn't dulled his mind. An oxygen tube rested under his nose, but his voice was steady when he spoke. You're the man who stopped for that broken-down ambulance, Henry said, extending a frail but firm hand. That's me, Deshawn said, shaking it gently. Glad you're still here to talk about it. Henry chuckled. So am I. My son told me about your situation. Lost your job for doing the right thing. That doesn't sit right with me. Deshawn shifted uncomfortably. I'm not looking for charity, sir. I've always taken care of myself. This isn't charity, Henry said, his eyes narrowing just slightly. It's opportunity. You see, when you've been in business as long as I have, you can read people. And I can tell you're not just decent, you're dependable under pressure. That's the kind of man I'd hire any day. Deshawn hesitated. What are you saying? Henry glanced at Charles, who stepped forward. We have a position at our Millstone plant, operations supervisor. It's good pay, steady work, and it comes with full benefits. You'd start next week. Deshawn blinked. Operations supervisor. I've never worked in a plant before. You've worked with your hands, Henry said. You understand mechanics, problem solving, and keeping your head when everything's going wrong. Skills can be taught. Character can't. For a moment, Deshawn didn't trust himself to speak. He thought of his empty fridge, the bills on the table, the way Loretta's words from last night kept echoing in his head. Finally, he nodded. All right. I'll take it. Henry's eyes softened. Good. And Mr. Briggs, when you're in a position to help someone else one day, you remember this. You don't pass them by. The weeks that followed felt like a new life. Deshawn threw himself into the job, learning fast, earning respect from the crew. The paychecks meant he could fix his truck, pay off his overdue bills, and even start setting a little aside. One Friday afternoon, he left work to find the same young paramedic waiting by his truck. Just wanted you to know, she said, smiling, your quick thinking didn't just save a man, it gave you a whole new road. Deshawn grinned. Guess life's funny that way. You never know when stopping for someone else is really stopping for yourself.